Hello, guys. Welcome to this awesome episode of the Zenlife podcast. Today, we're joined by Paul Selig. Paul, it's awesome to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
And Sprout, we have you here as well for the color commentary.
Happy to be here. Thanks for being here, Paul.
Thank you.
So, Paul, you're in town for an event in Phoenix.
Uh-huh.
Awesome. And can you tell me a little bit about that?
I don't even know where it is, to be honest with you. Somebody's going to take me there and put me in a chair, and I'm going to close my eyes, and hopefully, the channeling will happen. But I do workshops all over the place. I don't do a lot of evenings, so this will be fun for me.
Okay.
To show up for a shorter episode, because the guides often work for, full weekends or 5 or 7 day stretches where they teach people. And I just show up in the chair and sit there, and hope that the reception is clean. And then I do my job, which is to be a radio for the guides and their teachings.
Amazing. Wow. I want to unpack that a little bit.
Sure.
So for some of our audience, some of the audience that listens to us knows all about channeling.
Uh-huh.
They are channels themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'm just very interested in it because one thing that me and Sprout talk about is connecting to source.
Uh-huh.
Is that synonymous with the guides?
Well, the guides are of source, and they're teaching us how to align to the aspect of ourself that knows it's of source, which is not necessarily the personality structure that, wants to figure everything out and get it right. They say there's an aspect in all of us who knows who he, she, it is. And that's the aspect that, I'm aligned to, but the guides themselves come to teach. So I work with a group that are teachers, and they come with an energy that they align people with and teach people how to be attuned through in order to support their own awareness of source.
Mm-hmm.
So, the guides are there to support us, I suppose, in bridging, two different realities. And hopefully, if what they're saying is to be trusted and true, lifting us to be able to operate in the higher.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Which leads me to being this awesome channel that you are as the vessel of Paul. What are some of the ways that you've found, if any, that help you tap into that more? Because this is the work you do. Are there either like body type practices like exercising?
No. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do anything anymore. I've done everything at one point or another, but my psychic abilities showed up when I stopped doing all those things when I was 25 years old. So I've been developing for a while. I really think of myself as a radio, and what I'm doing when I'm channeling is tuning the dial just an iota to get to that broadcast. If I want to work psychically and I want to tune into you or somebody else, or if you want to ask about your partner or your parents, I can do that, but I'm just tuning the dial to them. Mm-hmm. They become what I tune into, and then I I'm in reception of the broadcast. So in terms of people who are wanting to open up, and what people do, I always say learn discernment. Just because somebody doesn't have a body doesn't mean they're somebody you really need to be listening to. I always say, my grandma married 4 times, and none of them worked out well, and she's not who I want to go to for relationship advice on the other side, even though she might have strong opinions. But in terms of a practice, I opened up when I was 25, and then I didn't begin channeling or hearing clairaudiently until my early 30s on a regular basis. And then I actually spent 18 years sitting in a group where I was channeling every week. I was a college teacher. I wasn't looking to have a career or to be known for this work at all. I was just so fascinated by the phenomena of the channeling that I kept showing up for it. Mm-hmm. And in my case, when maybe 10, 11 years ago, the guides started delivering whole books through me that didn't require any editing, and the books are all spoken. So I'm a spoken channel. I'm not a written channel. I don't write the books that come through me. So I feel that in a certain way, my system was, I'm not going to say appropriated, but learned to work with or refined. I think that there's a skill set that comes with channeling, but I'm somebody who makes a real distinction between channeling and inspiration. I think inspiration is beautiful. and to be inspired and have an inspired thought or inspired art is of God, certainly. But when I speak to channeling, I talk about taking dictation or stenography. People, say, well, how do you edit your books? And I say, I don't edit the books. They can't be edited. They're not my books. So you don't get to go back and fix things or make them pretty or make them adhere to, the style of the moment. Mm-hmm. And so when I hear stuff that people are saying is channeled and it's all sort of zeitgeisty of, the political moment or the cultural moment, I tend to question it, because truth is truth, and truth operates beyond the day we sit in. It's inclusive of the day, but it's not dependent on that. So I recommend that people learn to discern, and ask for verification of what they get. And that was how I learned. I was working as an energy healer, and I was volunteering at a center for people that were living and really dying in those days from AIDS, because there was no cure, there was no medicine. And I found that when I had my hands on people's bodies, I could hear things for them. And when they kept verifying what I was hearing, I began to trust the dictation, trust the channel. And that was my beginning. But it always was for other people. My channeling's never been for myself. It's always for others.
Yeah, I really get that from you too. And I have this great appreciation for you as a channel, because I get this sense from you in some of the channelings and the videos that I've seen, that it's almost like, you're almost like, oh, like again, like it's work to channel. And sometimes it's just there and you're like, oh, I have to do this. I guess I have to do this. Somebody has to do this. So I really appreciate you. And I sort of see past, I don't think there's many channels out there doing it for themselves, but I don't see that at all with you. And it just helps me appreciate what comes through from the guides.
Yeah. I mean, I understand, it's channeling is not that sexy. Do you know what I mean? It's stenography. It's like being the court reporter, and you sit there and you take it, you render as it comes, and then it's done. And I remember a third of the broadcast after a channeling. That's about what I retain well. I remember the larger gesture of the lecture, and sometimes the examples, if the examples are interesting to me. But I always say, it's like I'm sitting in the back seat of a car, allowing the guides to do their work, and I'm listening from the back seat of the car, and I question what I hear. Because if I hear something that I think is just nuts, I'm going to interrupt, and then they're going to need to explain it in some way, because, and this is where it gets a little funny, I have now 7 books in print that I didn't write, and my name's on the cover, and I didn't write them. But because my name's on the cover, I feel a level of accountability to at least my role as the one showing up, and then having to, inquire if I don't understand, where they're trying to take us. Because I still want to know myself. I'm a student of the work more than the expert of it.
So is it ever interesting or shocking for you to listen back to what comes through, the 2/3 of it that you didn't get, where you're
I can't stand
getting
it.
that?
I don't like to watch myself. I don't want to hear myself. I was doing this in a group for many years, as I said, in New York, and I was not recording at all. And the guides turned to some woman who was in the group one night, and they said, Paul's not going to believe what's coming through him until he sees it written down. And the following week I recorded and I transcribed. And once I started seeing that it all made sense and didn't need any editing, I was kind of hooked. And as soon as I was there, the books started coming, and they really haven't stopped, but I don't like to listen to it. And I do enjoy, not enjoy, but I do find the transcripts really interesting, because I don't type them anymore. Somebody else types them, and then I get to, read them after the fact. And then I see how coherent the teaching really is, and I benefit the most from it because it's not coming in my voice. So you see, if you were the channel for these books, I'd be much happier in some ways, because I could listen to you and I could say, wow, that makes sense, and wow, that guy's making sense, or I don't buy any of this. And I don't have that luxury right now because it's coming through me. And the challenge I've had in most ways since this began is that it is coming through me, and who am I? And I don't mean that, in sort of a fraudulent way. It really is. Like, who am I? I still have my problems. I'm not a guru. I'm not a spiritual teacher, and I don't want to be.
Yeah.
Somebody else can sign up for that stuff, but I don't want it. I've done it in past lives. Bad crap happens. I'm staying away.
Okay.
You know, that's my feeling.
Yeah. Wow. That leads me to a question that I'm not sure if this one's, I'm sure the guides would have a lot to say about this, but you would as well. Past lives. We hear a lot of people talk about this, and this is something on my own personal journey that I've been tuning into right before I go to sleep or right when I wake up, trying to understand, you know, what was that past life, or what was I? Is there a way that we can tune into this or really know?
I don't, that's not how I get my information. I mean, I've gotten some in dreams, or I've been given names and they verify the dreams. I mean, I had a dream. God, I was in my early 30s and I was on jury duty, and I was looking forward to jury duty. I'd never done it before. I thought, oh, this will be good. I'll like do my civic duty, And the moment I got into the courtroom, I was melting down in anxiety. I couldn't figure out what the hell's going on. Why am I so anxious here? And I was meditating in those days, and I began hearing a name in meditation. And after a couple of days, I heard, look it up. And this is pre-internet, so it was like I had a book that was, I looked somebody up in an encyclopedia, and it was like, oh, there's that person. And the person the name I heard confirmed a dream I'd had, and then later when there was internet, I was able to look the name up and find the picture of the person that I dreamt about, so it was all sort of verified, but it showed me why I don't like those things. Mm-hmm. But that was it for me. When I read for people, I don't do a lot of past life work. I think for the most part, our crap is up here today to be seen. So if I'm carrying baggage from history, it's showing up in my life today. And if I can work through it in my life today, I believe I'm working through it for all time. Do you understand? I don't have to go back necessarily to be able to transform something, because the opportunities in the relationship show up, I suspect, in the present day as well.
Mm. Wow. Okay. That gives me a new insight and perspective on people who, when the information comes where that you have had a past life, what is that even? What is the importance of that? Because like you said, you maybe you just remember it and that's good, or maybe you bring it in and it's just that recognition of having it, but it's what's coming up now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what's coming up now, the day is the teacher that we have, the life that we've chosen to live through. This is the teaching we have, and the relationships we take. They may be old ones, and they may come from other times. The guides I work with acknowledge past lives, but that's not what they're teaching. So other people, that's their work. They read records, they do all these things, and I respect that work. It's just not what comes through me. And when I do read for somebody and I get that kind of information, and I usually only get it because I see them in another form, or I see them in clothing that is no longer worn, and then I go, oh, okay, that must be what this is. And usually if it's coming up, there's a reason for it and it's relevant. But I find it all very interesting. The longer I'm doing this work, the less interested I am in the narratives around it and the stuff that feels really fascinating. Because when I was new, I wanted to know it all, and who was I, and was it important, and and ultimately it was a lot of ego, but it was a stage of growth and something that I got to go through and then hopefully leave behind, because those things can be wormholes too. We can go into these sort of really interesting, micro journeys of who we were and what we learned and all those things. And I think if there's benefit to that, there will be benefit, but it doesn't have to be, you don't have to know. Mm-hmm. You have to know, I think, who you are in the present moment. And the self that the guides speak about knowing is what they call the true self, which is the aspect of self that has been there for all of it. The aspect of the divine or God or source energy, whatever you want to call it, that has come just as you and just as everybody else too. And when you get that, it takes a little bit of the specialness away.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm very interested in your work, almost with that excitement that you probably had when you first discovered it.
Yeah.
So my question for you is, what excites you now on the journey? Where are you? Where's your attention?
I mean, I am in an interesting place with it all. You know, I was speaking to a friend last night who, I mean, I consider her sort of a mentor. She's an older person, and she's been a medium for 50 years. And when she talks, I believe it. And she was saying, you know, you're not who you were when I met you years ago. And I'm saying, well, I'm still looking for a date, and I still haven't figured out where I need to live. And I've got all these questions still. But where I'm at in this is wanting more to express the teaching that comes through me, as opposed to just rendering it. So I've said in the past, and I think that there's truth to this, you know, the radio, which is what I am, doesn't always get to dance to the music, you know, and I'm so busy taking the dictation, and there's been, you know, so many thousands and thousands of pages of stuff at this point. I mean, they'll deliver in a 7-day workshop 80 pages of a book, you know, right in front of an audience, you know, just boom, 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 and, you know, and then again, they'll do something the next weekend or the next weekend, the next weekend. So there's been so much stuff that I don't know that I've integrated it as well as I might. There are people that are working really with great industry as they work with these teachings and having remarkable experiences. And I take some of those experiences for granted now. Much of the phenomena that's associated with this work or the psychic work are things that I sort of accept as part of my life now. So they're not glamorous, you know, the way I thought they were before they developed. So my hope for myself now is really that I am able to live the life of the self that knows he is safe in the world, which is the true self, you know, the aspect of self that isn't afraid, that shows up anyway. I'm pretty good at showing up anyway for this stuff, and I often resist it. But I'm feeling the value for me of, I can't say owning it, but it's of accepting the validity and the profundity of some of what's coming through, because I prefer to keep it on the table sometimes where I can look at it from every angle and try to understand it. And understanding is intellectual, and I have a good intellectual understanding of the teaching. And when I'm channeling and when the guides are working with groups of people and they're bringing through the energy, getting everybody working with the energy, then I know it, because that's experiential. And I think all true knowing is experiential. It's not intellectual at all. So I'm looking towards moving more into my own realization of this work, you know, as I continue it. Experiential, yeah, the being of it, as opposed to the relaying of it. And when I'm relaying it, I am being it. But what I'm seeing is where I need to be accountable to my own thinking, my own issues. I do believe when somebody gets triggered, that means there's something to be addressed, and the work is there, you know, for all of us, you know, on this path. I do believe that we're here to learn, and that we learn through our experiences. And you know, so I'm in the same boat as everybody else, I got to say, at that level. You know, I'm here trying to do my best with all this stuff. But I do believe what the guides are teaching is true. And because of that, I feel that I am, you know, being invited into this in another way now, perhaps, than I once thought, you know. Best I can say it as of today.
And Paul, I was thinking too, have you changed the way you let it flow through you? Was there a time that you used to like block it out a bit more, or now do you let it flow when it comes, or did it change?
It's different. Yeah, it has changed. At the beginning, when I first started, and I first started doing this little group in my apartment, I was about 33 years old. I used to feel like I had a tin can and a string up to my head, you know, from the old game telephone. I mean, your generation probably never even played that, but, you know, you had walkie-talkies. We had a tin can and a string, right? And I kept feeling like I got the tin can. I hope to God somebody's going to pick up the other freaking can and say something, or I'm stuck. And I used to channel in New York once a week and Connecticut once a week. I was just new. And the energy was really big. People could feel the energy, so people started showing up. And like a lot of people, and I was way out of I wasn't developed at all. I wasn't ready for that. But I used to sit in the damn car with a friend who would drive me to Connecticut, and the whole hour and a half on the way to the channeling, I'd say, what if I can't hear? What if they all leave? What's going, you know, terror. And one day I was about to do a group, and I heard the guide say, can we have permission to merge? And I went, okay. And I felt the energy sort of now, we didn't talk about downloads then, but it would be a download of energy, and it was a full body download. And since then, I don't feel like I'm having to access something farther away. It's always present now. But it's always present if I turn the dial. See, the guides I work with don't override free will. They don't tell people what to do. And I'm very aware, people say, my guides are telling me I have to do this. I'm going, check it out, because that's not respectful of free will. My guides will let me walk into traffic if I want to. But if I say, should I cross the street into oncoming traffic, they'll probably say, not wise. Because, the choice is mine. You
can tune in like a radio dial.
Yeah,
you can tune it. You can feel it always present, but you can make it sharper by tuning and let it flow.
It's not quite like that. It's like, if I'm not channeling, I'm not channeling. If I'm not trying, people, my friends say, you know what I'm thinking. And I go, well, I have to tune into you to do that. And fortunately, I'm not. It doesn't occur to me to tune in telepathically to my friends. I do it in my work. And a lot of my work is tuning into other people. So people come to me and say, my 16-year-old kid hates me and I don't know what's going on. I say, what's the kid's name? I tune into the kid. I start to look like the kid, which is interesting. It's sort of a form of physical mediumship, I'm told. And then I hear, and then I say, this is what I'm hearing. And the parents say, oh my God, you look just like her. Oh my God, that's what she said to me yesterday. And then we go, how do we lift this? So everybody's not just reenacting their drama, And so I enjoy that work because you can sort of have some verification for it. You can say, yeah, that's what he said, or that's what she looks like. But I don't do this. I'm walking around at a level of availability. But when I'm teaching or I'm working on a book, the guides are really coming through. I mean, they're really diving in. And then I'm literally stuck in the chair, whisper, repeat, whisper until it's done,
Does something take place that opens you up to tune in? Does it make it where you're like more receptive, or now's the time, do you feel? Or
No. I work on a schedule. I work a lot, and I'm assuming the guides know the schedule, because if someday I show up to channel and they don't, I'm screwed. I can't do it anymore. And I know people that have had that experience. I know one guy who told me that he was teaching a 5-day channel, technique that his guides brought through, and he had all these people, and he showed up for his class, and his guides said, we brought this teaching down, we can accomplish the whole thing in 35 minutes, or like that. And he had people that were there for 5 days. He didn't know what to do. I've heard of other people who just sat there and waited for the transmission. And I wouldn't do very well with that, So no, I show up. This is my process. It's a very simple process. I work with a prayer protection, and I do that because it sets a field that I like to work with, and it also supports other people who may have issues around the occult or what channeling is. It sort of gets all that stuff out of the way, so we're in a clean space. But as I'm doing this little prayer protection, I'm imagining myself climbing over into the backseat of a car and turning the steering wheel over. And that's my meditation. And then I'll hear one phrase, just one phrase repeated again and again and again and again. And when I say that one phrase, which is my job, is to speak what I hear, the one phrase, then the whole teaching will come piling out right on top of it.
Paul, can you say that one more time, the visualization prayer that you do?
Well, I mean, I'm imagining that I'm sitting in the front seat of the car with the guide, and I climb into the back seat and I turn the wheel over. That's it.
What does that mean? You turn the wheel over?
I turn the steering wheel over, so I'm not the one driving. I'm allowing the guides to steer for now, and I'm going to sit in the back seat and allow this to progress.
Okay.
But because I'm still in the car and I'm not unconscious, I'm a conscious channel. I mean, Edgar Cayce, who is the great channel of the last century, used to go to sleep. He was in a full out sleep mode, and he would do medical diagnoses, extremely accurate, amazing amounts of work came through this guy, but he didn't remember any of it. So I'm just in the backseat of the car. My consciousness is present, but it's receded.
Okay.
And that's the difference.
That almost ties into the phrase you're talking about with Aubrey Marcus about freedom, when freedom comes.
Oh, yeah, that thing. I'll tell that story. I mean, I always have to say it this way, I'm like 99.9% sure that I heard this when I was first opening up, because I wrote it down on a piece of paper and I stuck it in a book because I didn't understand it. I don't think it's something anybody told me. What I heard was freedom will come when the throne relinquishes its king. And I didn't get it. And I get it now because it really is the essence of this teaching, which is, who's sitting in the throne? Is it the personality self? Is it the one who wants everything the way he wants it to be and get, and all of the stuff that we're told to aspire to? Or is it the true self, the aspect of self who knows? And the guides have pretty much said, the small self rules a small kingdom. And the true self, or the divine self, or the God within, which is what they speak to it as, operates in another level, which is, you can call it the kingdom. And they say the kingdom is the awareness of the inherent divine in all manifestation. They say there's one source that makes up all things. And, it's been named differently, and we all have these narratives attached to what this is. This is a table, this is a microphone, that's a man, that's a woman. We know all these things and what they mean, but they finally say it's all the divine or source in articulation, and articulation in this case means manifestation. So the realization of nothing being outside of God or outside of source is the big challenge of the teaching, because I want to put people and things outside of that. Mm-hmm. But the guides have said so many times, what you put in darkness calls you to the darkness. And you can't be the light and hold another or anything in darkness. It can't be so. It's the height of hypocrisy, and it's the problem with most religions, which is we're right and they're wrong. And then they also say, self-righteousness is always the small self. And small self, I mean the personality construct. It's not a negative title. Mm-hmm. It's just the small self is the personality self who thinks he knows everything, and what he knows tends to be based on inherited data. Mm-hmm. I'm a Caucasian male in my 50s, and I live in New York City, and I have a dog, and this is my tax income bracket, and all the stuff that we use to self-define.
Right.
Which not really who we are. They're ways of knowing ourselves, and they have their own validity in some ways in terms of commerce and exchange. But who we are, if I'm to understand this, is something much, much more wonderful.
So did that insight of seeing the divinity in all people, did that come about the same time that you were beginning to wake up? Like you said, like in 87 or so, when you were around 25, did it all come together, or slowly over time?
My God, it was a train wreck.
Yeah.
I've never met anybody who starts to wake up and doesn't sort of fall apart as a part of it, because what you're doing is you're sort of realizing who you are at the cost of what you thought. And that's challenging for me. Good. Yeah. So for me, I was a hard partying playwright. I was a year out of Yale. I was doing really well, supposedly, in the world. I was, getting my picture in magazines, and I was being produced in New York and London, and I was, getting addicted to drugs, and I was drinking like a fish. And finally, one night, I was in a hotel room, and I was like, I'm trapped. I don't know what I was in. I knew I was in trouble. I couldn't have named the trouble. I really didn't blame anything. I just knew I was in trouble. And these Bible people leave these books in the drawers in hotel rooms. Maybe they don't anymore, but they did then. And it said prayer for people in crisis. And I'd been raised an atheist, but I said the stupid prayer, and it worked. I heard a voice 3 days later telling me to get my act together, and that was the beginning of great change. Mm-hmm. So I understand that there are people that have these experiences where suddenly they're enlightened. I don't buy it. Whenever somebody comes to me and announces themselves as enlightened, I question it, because I think the people that are truly that awake don't need to talk about it. They just are busy being awake and sort of, in the awe and the wonder and the compassion of that state of being, and I think there's deep compassion that comes. So no, it was a painful thing. I talked my life in those days for the next few years as I was opening up spiritually and psychically, which has been a process and continues to be. It was like, I said, it's like taking off a dirty sock, and all the stuff that's accumulated, it's just falling out, and it all is messy and it stinks, and that's what it felt like. Mm-hmm. So no, it wasn't very graceful. And the way that I channel now with the lecturings, That began, I think, in 2008 when I quit smoking. And I was a heavy smoker for much of this. And I was like a 4-pack-a-day guy. And when I quit, my nervous system just opened up like crazy. And the clairsentience, which was the ability to feel what other people are feeling, that had been dulled down. It was very prominent when I first opened up in my 30s, but it was dulled down. It opened wide up. And when it opened wide up, I mean, that was overwhelming to me because the sensitivity was hard to walk around New York City in. But the receptors were really clear, and that's when the lecturing began in earnest, and the books followed shortly thereafter. So it's a process.
Yeah, I feel better now hearing that because it
yeah.
really began for me in 2014. And what a struggle. The ego tries to hang on so much to not let it be the way, you know, I feel and see it as now. But yeah, there's so much to what took place in that time, the process I went through, and still, of course, I'm in. But yeah, it was just a beginning of that insight or that different perspective. Really, is what it was, and then taking time to go through it. But yeah, it's all a process.
It's not a contest.
Daily.
You know what I mean? I don't know we ever arrive in a state of. I don't know that happens.
Oh, I did last night.
You did? You arrived last night? Was it good?
Yeah, it was great.
I'm
I did a post about it.
I'm here now.
You can invite me to visit. You know,
It's like coming over to the house and coming inside. Now I'm here.
Yeah. But no, in all seriousness, I love the light that you're shedding on the small self. It being, you know, it could be as glamorous as it could look from the outside perspective. You know, your story, you know, Yale doing great from the outside, but you know that's whatever, you know, Hollywood, that's advertising, that's all the ego, small self. And I love what you said, the people who are actually enlightened are too busy being enlightened to talk about it, because to talk about it, you go through that small self typically.
Well, I mean, I think that there's an excitement when anybody first opens up. There's tremendous excitement, you know, and I think that that's a wonderful thing.
Absolutely.
You know, and then you sort of settle in a little bit and things change. And I think the excitement is always present, but the need to, I don't know. I mean, you see, when I started going into this stuff, there wasn't a culture. There was a new agey stuff happening, you know, it was the 80s, early 90s, but it was not in the popular culture the way it is now. It wasn't a fashionable thing to do. And I kept my mouth shut about my work. I taught at NYU, which is somewhat conservative as an institution, and nobody knew what I did there because I didn't talk about it. I wanted to keep my jobs. And finally, after a while, I had a couple of books out, and I finally said, well, everybody's, you know, my students were, you know, watching me channel on YouTube. There wasn't much I could do. And I got tired of hiding and pretending, so I just said, okay, I'm going to do this work and step up to it. But I don't know. I mean, I think it's I think anybody opening up to their potential and to the potential of a spiritual life is cause for great celebration. And however that shows up for an individual is right for them. My path was my path, and I don't wish it on somebody else. I'm grateful for it. I don't always understand it, but it's what I've had to live through, and I think we're all getting that. We all come here and we sign up for what we need to learn.
Absolutely, yeah. And in my journey, the way it's unfolded so far, I almost see things as a scope. You know, there's the small self microscope and the large self, and then you can go on to infinity, really, now that I'm thinking about it. But as I expand my consciousness, awaken, enlighten, all these things, it's a great feeling. And I find myself almost a bit like what you're talking about. I'm wanting to come back to just some of the basic things in life that could include embodiment and just going out and doing unspiritual things, unenlightened things, and then working my way back around and getting a full gamut and a balance to the holistic experience.
Yeah, some people come to my workshop sometimes and they say, you know, I have a really great spiritual life, but you know, I don't know how to, you know, but my business life, you know, is separate. And I go, well, your business life is also your spiritual life. You know, having sex is also part of your spiritual life. You know, hanging out with your friends and having a great time, it's all one thing. It's all expression. You know, it's not about, I don't think, the the jargon or the practice. I think everything is the practice, finally. Because your consciousness is present in everything that you do. And that doesn't mean you're not supposed to enjoy yourself here. I think we get to. We have a body. We're incarnated in this crazy landscape that we share. So yeah, I totally know it. And I took 2 years off once from all this stuff when I was in my mid-30s. I just went, this is too freaking crazy, enough. And I just wanted to go get a relationship and write a play again. And I did those things. And then I came back to the work and never left it,
Wow.
Yeah.
It's almost like it was the first round of it was kind of a warm-up or an initiation, and then you got to go back and watch something else for a little while, and then you knew that this was the work for you.
I had to choose it, I think. I had to choose it, I mean, I was, I'll tell you the story. I don't tell the story a lot. But I was living with somebody who was trying to open up a business in Lower Manhattan. And when my ex found out I could do this, I used to hear, ask the guides this, ask the guides that. There was a captive psychic in the house. And so he wanted to know if he was going to be able to make the rent on his business in Lower Manhattan for the second month. He put down a deposit. And the answer was no. And he said, well, why not? And I heard, well, because there's going to be a terrorist attack in Lower Manhattan was the answer I got. And in fact, there was. And it was the next month. And it didn't make the rent because the whole neighborhood closed. And I didn't get information like that. I don't do world predictions. I don't do much of that stuff. Occasionally, if somebody comes and asks, I'll get it for them, but that's not my guide's work. But I got it for him in this specific reading. And after that happened, I realized I had to go back to work. And I never stopped. Wow. That's what changed it for me. It was, again, the verification of the information and the validity, and I couldn't shake it. And then there was a sense of responsibility then that I felt to it that I don't know if I had felt before.
And you chose it.
This time I did. I think when I first started, I was hungry for it, and I also wanted, I had left a career that I thought I was supposed to do, that I trained for. And you see, for me, the initial awareness that there was more than just sort of this reality, that there was perhaps a God or something, like whatever you want to call it, that was really mind-blowing to me. That meant nothing was as I thought it was. Nothing was what I thought. I was stunned by that. And so all I wanted was that then. All I wanted was to know that energy, to know that source, and that's what drove me. But I also had an investment, I think, in being special in those days, because I needed to, and I remember somebody saying to me, because I didn't even believe in channeling. This was never my thing. I was like the worst person they could have picked in some ways for this. But I had a medium friend in those days who said to me, I said, am I ever going to do this stuff full time? And she said, yeah, and you're 48. And I'm like, 48? That's 20 years from now. Are you crazy? What the, And she said, yeah. She said, you've been veiled for your own protection. And when it's time for the veil to come off, you'll be visible in your work. And the first book was published when I was 48, I think. Or it was dictated then, maybe 48, I think. And in retrospect, I couldn't have handled it when I was 35 or 45. I couldn't have managed this stuff. And I had to get to the place where I cared less about what other people think of me, because it's still hard, because you feel the judgment around this stuff. And it's still, I've watched videos of me channeling. I look like I'm nuts, and I know that, and I don't like it.
I think that's what I thought when I first saw you too.
Probably, yeah.
And then the first question, which I guess I'd love to ask you now,
Sure.
does it always come in that accelerated snippet? And would you have to slow down ever to dictate it, or would it just keep coming in at that rate for you to understand, or you to channel, and then do you purposely slow it down to?
I don't purposely slow it down. There have been times when it doesn't happen often, when I channel directly without the whispering and repeating, and the guides do that by slowing the whole transmission down.
Got it.
And it's a little trippy for me. And when I work that way and it's that direct, I don't remember any of it really. It's a much more sort of precarious place to be sitting in for me.
Do you have a preference?
Well, the whispering and the repeating works, and I'm used to it. It's like this is how it feels, and I move into the rhythm of it, and then I understand my job is to hear the next phrase, hear the next phrase, hear the next phrase.
What's a kind of cool comparison, if I can make this,
Yeah.
is it's almost like, have you ever seen a rap artist like do a freestyle?
Probably.
They close their eyes and they go into a meditative state, and they vibe with the music like this, and they're letting whatever come through, rhyming, of course.
Yeah.
And it looks a lot like what you're doing.
It's a light trance that I've moved into. That's what I do. As far as I understand it. So this is what I'm used to. Is it always going to be this way? I don't know. Sometimes it's a mile a minute. Sometimes it's slower. Sometimes there's this accent that comes through. Sometimes there's not. And, I just accept what it is. When the accent comes, I'm pleased because that guide with that voice loves to hear himself talk. And I find that when that happens, I get to really relax and enjoy the show, because this one likes to pontificate. And he does it very, very well. And big chunks of the books are in that voice, and they're then transcribed.
It seems like now you're so much in tune with it, where it may have been different before, but now you feel like it seems and it feels like the rhythm is together and not like crossing.
There's some old video of me channeling from my initial, maybe 10 years old or something, that's up online, and you'll see my body is rocking back and forth a lot. It's herky-jerky. There was a period where I only channeled on my feet. And it was tough because I work with my eyes closed most of the time, and they'd have a big circle of chairs, and I'd be walking around the circle, with my eyes closed, hoping I don't fall into somebody, speaking a mile a minute and waving my arms. But there was the energy was coming through with such intensity that was a way for me to manage it. And now it's just more comfortable. It's a little more fluid. It's not as hard on my body as it used to be, and it used to be pretty hard.
Yeah, I feel that now. I feel it very like waves, just very rhythmic and very in tune together.
Yeah.
And it just feels more peaceful and more in alignment. And it's really, I think, like you were talking about, less taxing on the body. It's not going against the physical form.
Yeah.
It's working with it together.
Exactly.
That feels really good.
Good, I'm glad.
I like that. That's
So,
something that-
do you have something?
Well, Dan and I were talking a lot about the other night. We were, going through our transition and our awakening, our phases, and one of them was like releasing some ego and just being more, feeling more of spirit and more of the true intentions, and releasing the blockages, of ego and all the things that come with it. Of course, all the desire, the want, and the lack and the envy and jealousy, all the things ego can be, to release that. So we went through a phase of just trying to release that and be more spirit. But then we came to the point where we got this one night, we had this this feeling that came through us to like have both, and you work with them together like a DNA double helix, where we have the spirit, the intuition, but also use the ego there too to accomplish things. And I heard that you talk a bit about that as well.
They don't talk much about the ego. I mean, they do say, I think what they talk about is that, we operate with this mask. They call it the personality structure, the small self. But I think, there's a place for all those things, and I think it's not a bad thing to have a healthy ego. If somebody steps on your foot, hopefully you're able to say, please don't step on my foot. Which is a healthy statement.
I have a question here. I think it's
Sure.
the right time. What is it, and maybe the guys would have something to say about this, what is it that got the ego a bad rep to begin with, that we all want to lose our ego?
I actually hear it's got a bad rep for a good reason. It's misguided. I hear this is the guides. It believes itself to operate in separation. True self does not, and the true self does not. You can have a healthy ego. You can have a healthy ego, a healthy sense of self, a healthy sense of self, but still comprehend the innate divinity of who and what you are, and who others are as well, and who others are as well. The predilection to demand separation, to demand separation. I must be the best. I must be the best. I have to be the best. I have to be the best, or please make me the worst, because it confirms an idea of myself as the small self, is the small self trying to dictate a reality, It's not the healthiest reality to operate through. It's not the healthiest reality to operate through. You can learn through your choice, whatever they may be. You can learn through your choices, whatever they may be, the true self you see. The true self you see acclimates the structure of personality, to be utilized in a higher way, It is not wrong. It is not wrong. It just thinks it's the king and the throne. It just thinks it's the king and the throne, and in fact it is not.
Wow. I'm going to have to listen back to that one.
I feel that so much.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right. I hope it made sense. I mean, I understood it, but
It
it's what they
did.
talk about. So.
Yeah, it's almost like I was like not hearing it with my ear, but
Yeah.
I was feeling it with my heart. It felt like it was going right here.
Yeah. I mean, we all have a personality. We all have an ego. I don't think that there's anything wrong with the personality or the ego. I just think what we've done, if I'm correct, is mistake those things for the truth of who we are. And that's the challenge. That's just a simple challenge, It's
Okay. So now, as we're starting to get into more of an ascended collective consciousness where people are able to widen the scope of their small self, how are we going to make room for that in the collective? What changes will we need to make to see that?
I mean, this is the big stuff that they're teaching now, and it's the teachings of the book that just came out and the one that's coming out next, because they're really talking about the collective. And the reason for their teachings, I think, has a lot more to do with the collective agreements that we make that create a uniform reality that we operate through than people sort of wanting to self-improve, And I don't know what the guides are teaching self-improvement. They say the small self, they've said, cannot improve the small self. It doesn't really work that way, And there's a place for that, but it's not what they're teaching. So my understanding is it is about consciousness and the realization that consciousness informs matter, and that how we hold anything in consciousness claims a relationship or agreement to it. So the guides teach this thing they now call the upper room, and they say, really, this is how they describe it. We're operating here in an octave, a collective octave. An octave has low notes and high notes, but it's a shared reality. They say everything is operating in tone or vibration, and we, in this landscape that we share, are operating in a collective agreement. That's an ocean. That's a man. This is what a mountain is. This is good. This is evil, depending on the inherited data that we have that makes something good or evil, which is basically our morality, which is, varies from culture to culture. So we have this octave. But they say every piece of music, including you and your tone, your consciousness, can be transposed to play in a higher octave. And when you're lifted or playing an intonation, your field is operating in a higher octave. You call to you that which is of like vibration. They say that's how a world is made new. You can't do it at the level that everything was created at. So the guides have said, for example, you've lived with war for so long that you expect war. You can't imagine living on a planet that doesn't have it. It's a given. So we're always going to have it because we expect it. We're always claiming it. So they speak of lifting to a level of consciousness where war is not possible. That's how you stop war. It's no longer present at that level. Now, when the guides teach the upper room, they talk about it being a place that operates without fear. Fear, they say, is a broadcast. It operates in a low alignment or a low tone. And that the action of fear is to claim more fear. And they say, look at every choice you've ever made in fear and see what it got you. You probably got more of the same. So when you lift to that level you're not operating in fear. I mean, one of the easiest ways people can begin to progress with this stuff, I hear from the guides, is stop taking actions based in fear. Stop confirming it and stop damning other people. Finally, they say, what you damn damns you back, what you bless blesses you. So any of this stuff, you know, where people are pointing fingers and taking sides and demanding retribution, all of that's pretty low-level stuff, and things don't change from that. We'll just continue to kill each other. You know, we'll continue to war. It's all about separation. So you move to the higher level of vibration or consciousness where separation isn't present in the same way. And that's the level of identification where you can begin to perceive the inherent divine in others. Do you understand that? Because the true self, the aspect of you that is and knows himself as divine, perceives the divine in everything. If you may have heard, you know, God sees God in everything. It's that simple. And so that's that level of agreement. When you live to that place, everything begins to change. The guides have said so many times, you cannot make anything holy. It already is. But the only problem they say that humanity faces now is the inherent denial of the divine. The denial of God is the only problem we got. And that's not a religious teaching. It's the denial of the one source that's an expression as all things. And so when we begin to perceive that or align to that, we begin to change our reality. The guides are teaching alchemy now, and they're teaching how to lift what you see to what they call the upper room. And you can only lift it when you're not damning it or judging it.
Is that the upper room is like the higher octave?
The higher octave. The guides I work with don't talk about dimensions, but they say, yes, exactly right.
Okay.
It's the octave above the one we express in.
Well, what's interesting about the octave example, I know this just from music theory, you know, if I'm operating at 432 hertz, go me, that is a tone, whether it's a C or D, whatever it is, and that could be played on any level of
exactly. That's exactly what the guides say, all the way into infinity.
Yep. Okay, and that could be played just as low as well.
Exactly right.
And when it's played low, the low vibration is around.
Exactly right. You see, because like attracts like. You know, it's all co-resonance or entrainment. So when you're operating in the higher octave, what they're teaching is how to lift what you encounter through nature of being, not even through intention, because the field you hold is at that level of resonance that you end up sort of being able to transpose reality through your presence. It's pretty trippy, but they break it down, and I understand it only because they teach it in these groups, and everybody can feel the energy as they begin to work with it that way. I mean, it's a very simple claim they make. They call it lifting to the upper room, which is the octave above. And when you claim I'm in the upper room and you feel the energy go whoosh, and then you ask yourself what you're afraid of, at that place, there's nothing really to be afraid of there. You have to go back down to have those experiences. But if you're there, what you do is you're calling to yourself, because the guides say we're always manifesting everything. I mean, it's not like I'm going to go manifest a great house or a great relationship. Everything you see around you, you're in energetic accord to, which is alignment, which is an equation that must be present with your field. So when you're lifting to the higher, everything that you call to you then operates at that level as well, and you become the translator of the tone.
And I'm feeling so much about what blocks that place, because that's a beautiful place to be and to feel. And I'm feeling so much that what blocks it is who is on the throne or who is in the driver's seat. And by us keeping that fragile ego in control, it almost blocks us from being able to be part of that realm. It holds us.
I don't think you're knocking the ego off the throne. I don't think it's about that kind of a process. But I do know that when I'm frightened or when I'm angry and I'm mandating what should be from that level of consciousness, I'm probably not having a very good time or helping much of anybody. You know, I'm calling to me those things that exist in, as you said, the low vibration. And so I have opportunity here and I have choice here. And I don't think this is about what people call spiritual bypassing, because the guides say you can't transform what you're in denial of. You know, you really can't.
I'm feeling like a trusting something outside yourself. I felt like having some trust outside yourself allows more growth, where if we're trying to only rely upon just like it's all coming from within us, then that might hold us back a bit. But having that trust of something outside of us allows us to...
Well, it's within and without. Some people find a God in a cloud works for them. I don't find that works for me. I feel that it's to be found within. But when it's found within, it's the doorway to everything else.
Was it an atheist book that
yeah.
you first picked up at 25?
An atheist book? I was an atheist.
What was the book you picked up?
Oh, that was the Bible.
You picked up the Bible, and then 3 days later?
I heard a voice.
Yeah, the Gideons.
I said, help.
Yeah.
Okay.
I said, I asked
Something
for help.
about the way those words were there and the vibration of those words, what it did to you, even though now there's no God outside of yourself that resonates, that triggered something.
Well, I don't deny a God in all things. I get frustrated at times with people who say, I am God and I am the only God. You are God. Everybody is. But if you think you're the only one, you're in for a rough ride, because it don't work that way. The moment I deny the inherent divine in anyone else, I have denied it in myself. That's really how it works. You can't have it both ways, and people think they can, you know. You can't be the light and hold another in darkness. It's the height of hypocrisy. So I don't say that there isn't the God that I understand, if I understand it, and I can't say that I do, is in every cell of your body and mine and in the air we breathe and in the sky and in the moon and in the shit and everything else. It's not just the pretty things or the things that have been labeled spiritual. You know, and that's the trip of the teaching. That's the hardest part of the teaching for me, because I get it. But is that my daily experience? No, but it's not going to be the personality self that has that level of perception. It's the part of the self that aligns to the higher, which is what the guides are teaching, is how to align to the higher vibrational consciousness that has the ability to perceive at that level. So it's within and without, I think. Okay.
And the other thing I'm just tripping on this octave teaching is you have the concept of who you are, even the small self, even the, I'm Scorpio moon, Cancer sun, you know, that's, you know, Scorpio kind of has this sort of energy over all these things that we think could only be low or some things only be high. It's just that almost crystal of your being, your essence in the higher room, up leveled. And that can just, it's just a higher tone.
Exactly
so
right.
any way you are can just be played at a higher frequency, higher pitch.
And some things will need to be transformed to be played at that level. Do you understand? So my desire for revenge, which is operating at a low level, ain't going to be lifting. It's going to be keeping me in the low tone. Do you understand that? But if I release that, then I get to lift. Then the frequency begins to lift. You know, that's the challenge of this. I mean, one of the easiest metaphors for this work I've come through, and the guides talked about this in one of the books, I think. If you know, like those old huge, you know, balloons that people used to ride around in baskets in, you know, the great big helium balloons, you know, they were weighted with sandbags, and you'd have to unload the sandbags to take off, and you're dumping the baggage that's mooring you to the lower. You're releasing it or transforming it so that you can lift.
And that comes first.
That's the process. I don't know that it comes first. I think it happens as a result of this, and I think it happens because we encounter our fear, we encounter our rage or our shame or those things that are holding us down, and when they get encountered, it becomes the opportunity to transform. We can't transform what we're in denial of, you know? So
that's the process then.
Yeah, I think it's the process.
The releasing is part of the process.
Absolutely.
Of moving. There's kind of at the same time going on, it's like simultaneously taking place. It feels
it's like emptying out your closets, you know what I mean? That's all it's like. It's the stuff that's accrued there that's sort of taken up space and stopping the higher from, you know, being present. And maybe that's just re-knowing the baggage that was and lifting it in a higher way. Maybe that's the key to it.
Is that kind of the work too, to identify that and to acknowledge it and then begin the process to release it? Is there a...
Yeah, that is, I think, part of the process. The book that's coming out in August talks a lot about that. They talk about what happens when the mask starts to loosen, you know, and come off. And, you know...
Those are those awakening moments where people can have something a little like
Yeah, some of it's nice. Some of it, for me, it was awful. I mean, when I was channeling this book, I was like, oh, please, no. But it's like, if you pick up a rock that's been sitting in the mud and you move the rock, what's been sitting in the mud is going to, all that little vermin, is going to start screaming and, crying at the light. It's like if you've ever, opened up the basement door and the muck in the basement starts to scurry.
Right.
That's what seems to happen when things are exposed to the light. And the guides say we're dealing with that now on a collective level. And they say
that's what's happening.
Oh, totally.
I thought something was happening.
Collective.
No, really,
Yeah.
it's hard to find a basis to sort of be like, oh, okay, this is really happening. But when enough people start talking about it, and this is why a couple of the questions I have here, and I know we're almost at time here. If the guides want to come in for this is one that came in from my friend who's attending your workshop, so she might ask you this there. How much longer until New Earth is completely here, and what's going to happen to those who are not on board with it?
Well, you see, I don't hear about this at all. I actually think it's not an accurate paradigm. I think consciousness is shifted by those present on the plane, and as we shift, things are transformed. I actually hear that we're in the beginning of a very large process that may go on for a very long time, and what we're beginning to perceive now. So this isn't the guys. I'll let the guides pipe in, but I'm gonna do this one first. What we're dealing with now is what in the very first book they said humanity is at a time of reckoning, and a reckoning is a facing of oneself and all of one's creations, and everything that's been created in fear needs to be recreated or reknown in a higher way, and that includes government, religion, economic systems, all this stuff that's been fraught with fear. And I'm going to say something: greed is fear, war is fear, murder is fear. There's no way around these things. Do you know what I mean? Greed is a belief in scarcity, which is a lack of source. So all of these things are having to be attended to, I think, and on a structural level, and we're seeing whole systems teeter right now. And I don't know if some of the guides say there's only so long you can repair a roof before you got to knock the building down and then build again. And maybe that's positive. I don't get that we're at the end of civilization at all. I do get that we're at a place where we have created the means of self-destruction. Bombs are not meant to keep people safe. And that's what we say they are. Bombs are actually meant to kill people and to go off, and eventually they do. Do you understand? So our belief in, our attachment to fear has created this whole need to challenge the planet, challenge life on this planet, all those things. So I think those things are having to be addressed now. Now, let me go and see if they want to say anything about a new earth, because it's not a phrase they've used. We don't like the phrase. They're saying we don't like the phrase because it perpetuates a myth that things have to be different, that things have to be different. In fact, they have to be reknown. In fact, they have to be reknown. The inherent divine in each of you, the inherent divine in each of you needs to be welcomed in, needs to be welcomed in. It's that aspect of each of you. It is that aspect of each of you that will build a new world, or a higher way of expressing, or a higher way of expressing. No one is left behind finally. No one is left behind finally, because the divine is in all things, because the divine is in all things. You may choose to operate, although you may choose to operate in very different ways, in accordance with the vibration you hold. The myth of a new world, everybody lifting to it, and everybody lifting to it in one moment, in some ways is myth, in some ways is myth. It's the realization of the higher that's already present. It's the realization of the higher that is already present that catapults you to a new way of being, to a new way of being. The divine is present now. The divine is present now. It is a level. It is a level of vibration that you may attend to, You don't leave this planet to go there. You are not leaving this planet to go there. You're realizing it here. You are realizing it here. To realize is to know. To realize is to know, and to know the divine in all things. And to know the divine in all things is to align to this teaching, as this woman is espousing, period. So that's what they're speaking to. So what they're saying is you can't make yourself holy. You can't make anything holy, but you can deny the divine. The denial of the divine is the problem. So I do hear that nobody's left behind, that everybody lifts, but I've heard them sort of speak to some of these beliefs of, I'll give you an example. I was channeling in California on 12/12. And somebody said, "Why are you doing a workshop on 12/12? Everything's going to end." And I said, "I don't get that. I'm going to show up anyway." And I think what shifted on 12/12 was maybe a potential. I opened up in '87 on the eve of this thing called the harmonic convergence. I heard people were going to be waking up. And I believed at that moment that that could be so. So I had an experience on it. I did, I saw that there is a God and you ask to be woken up. Why the hell would it want to say no? That's the innocence that I went there with at that time. But I had been raised with nothing. So I didn't have a lot to preclude my ability or my innocence to saying, well, maybe it's so. So I don't know that it happens the way some people say it will. But I don't listen to other channels. I don't read them. I don't listen to them. I pick up. It's not that I don't respect them. I just trying to keep it pure, as it comes through me. And anybody's welcome to disagree. That's not my business.
Wow, I'm feeling one more thing too. So much I got from what you said today, and one thing that really is sitting good with me is about the anchors and releasing and letting in more light. And I just got this feeling that it's really like you're talking about the synergy, the combination simultaneously with the light helping to release the anchor. So it's not just a focus on the anchor, focus on trying to release it. If we do that, we almost ignore the light. Yeah. But by looking to the light, that helps us to release the anchor. It's a process together, both happening, not just focused on the one.
Exactly. It's very well said. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the idea of, what you put on the altar, you're giving up, but it's not yours to take it off the altar. Your job is to put it there. Do you know what I mean? I can't do this here. That's an act of will and a healthy act of will. Surrender can be a wonderfully liberating act. But if I think I have to do it all myself as my personality, I'm probably going to be in for a much, much harder road.
Yeah. That's what I was really, really feeling so much. And that's just a beautiful message to share, that I think somehow we may have done something like that, but to share it with others who are struggling with that, because some may get focused on one thing and get stuck in that certain spot because they're only looking down at the anchor and not opening up to let more in. And just to share that concept of doing both, I think can be so helpful to help show an option or a perspective that can be good.
Okay, thank you.
I feel that so much today. Thank you for sharing so much. Sure. And it really, for me, helped so many things become more clear, almost like tuned me in.
Good.
Where I had certain, perspectives and feelings and intuitions, but today, time with you has made it really sit more clear and feel really good. And every time that you spoke, my heart felt so good. It just felt like it felt so just like part of me. I really enjoyed everything.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, it's all sitting really, really well with me too.
Good, I'm glad.
Thank you for that, and thank you for what the guides brought in, and also your perspective too, because a lot of the answers that you were given even before the guides were just as good, if not better. So I just want to say thank you for being here with us today, and I know you're doing a conference here, but you're not quite sure where it is. So where can people check out?
My website, which is just my name. It's paulselig, PaulSelig.com, and there's a calendar there. And I'm actually all over the place. I'm in LA next week, and then I'm in Big Sur, and then I'm in, Costa Rica, I think. I'm all over the place. So there's lots of places to come visit and check out the work with the guides. Yeah, and I live stream on Wednesdays, although I'm doing it tonight for some reason. Because I think I'm somewhere else on Wednesday. But there's all that's on the website for anybody's interested in checking it out.
Well, Costa Rica, we've been talking about going there too. This could be a nice alignment also.
Yep. Awesome, guys. Well, we'll end things there. Once again, thank you, Paul. Thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Paul. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
And you.
Thank you.